Welcome back to Pokemon Episode Summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 158, The Psychic Sidekicks. The episode begins with Ash and the gang walking through a forest as usual when they stumble across a sign that has a tip for trainers. It essentially states that this forest was filled with Ghost-type Pokemon that were severely dangerous and recommends that trainers use Psychic-type Pokemon to avoid any potential attacks. Ash and the gang begin to panic as they realize that they didn't have any Psychic Pokemon, so the Ghost Pokemon could just fucking kill them. But Brock then remembers that due to Psyduck's headache, it could use those Psychic attacks, like Confusion. So, Misty sends out her Psyduck and tells it to use Confusion if they run into a Ghost Pokemon, but Psyduck simply does nothing, as it doesn't understand what Misty said due to being too dumb. Suddenly, something begins to move in the nearby bushes, and Misty instantly orders Psyduck to get ready to use a Confusion as something pops out. It was a weird-looking Pokemon, presumably, and Psyduck was intimidated, so it simply forcibly returned back to its Pokeball. Wow, that was new for it. It usually forcibly came out. Ash and Brock then realize that whatever this creature was, it didn't seem dangerous, as it was just sitting there. So they go up to it and examine it, and Brock comments on how he's never seen a creature like this, and states that it didn't seem like it was a ghost type, because, ghost types usually seem scary. Ash then gets startled as he falls to the ground when a girl walks up behind him and confirms Brock's assumption that this wasn't actually a ghost type, as she clarifies that what Ash and the gang saw was actually her Giraffarigg's tail, explaining that Girafarig had a second head on its tail, which Ash confirms when he looks up Girafarig in the Pokedex, which also tells him it was a psychic Pokemon. They really had an opportunity in Gen 9 here to make Girafarig's second tail. It's completely on species. Like, they could have done a convergent species, and they didn't do that. Anyways, the mysterious girl then introduces herself as Cherry and explains her reasoning for having a Girafarig, being that she was interested in it because it was so unusual due to the second head on its tail, and she also caught it due to being from a town called Lentown, which had a tradition of capturing psychic Pokemon to protect against the ghost Pokemon in the woods. This prompts Brock to look in his guidebook for the location of Lentown, which Team Rocket over here, because they were spying on Ash and the gang with listening machines. And now that they knew the location of Lentown, they made a plan to go into the town and steal all of the psychic Pokemon that were there. As they plan, though, their cover is almost blown as Wobbuffet forcibly comes out of its Pokeball, but Jessie recalls it. Team Rocket then begin to get a little bit concerned as they remember all of the previous psychic Pokemon that they had encountered and state that psychic Pokemon were extremely difficult to catch, particularly due to a lot of them having, like teleport abilities like Abra and shit like that, but Meowth revealed that he had a secret weapon to defeat the psychic types, much to Jessie and James' amusement. Meanwhile, Ash and the gang were having some lunch with Cherry, when Cherry reveals that she wants to compete in the Johto League with her Girafarig, leading Ash and Pikachu to reveal that they were currently on their way to the 3rd gym badge. Brock then brings out some more sandwiches and some tea, and Ash and Pikachu are sure to share absolutely everything they eat together, leading Cherry to comment on how strong of a bond Ash and Pikachu seem to have. Ash and Pikachu blush at this comment, as Ash explains that the bond just came naturally with time. Cherry then reveals that she wanted a bond as strong as Ash and Pikachu's with her Girafarig, explaining that if a trainer and their psychic Pokemon were very close, then they could even communicate telepathically, and she wanted that ability. So, she decided to challenge Ash, believing that if her and her Girafarig battled him and Pikachu, then it would make their bond stronger. Ash quickly accepts, as he was dying for a battle anyways, and the battle started, with Pikachu going in for the first attack, being a quick attack, which knocked Girafarig down to the ground. But Girafarig was able to get back up, and its eyes proceeded to glow blue as it used a future sight attack. Although, Ash and the gang questioned what this attack was even supposed to do, as nothing happened. Eventually, when nothing still happened, Pikachu and Ash just decided to continue attacking, as Pikachu rushed up with agility and used Thunderbolt. Girafarig was about to counter with Stomp, but then the wind suddenly picked up immensely, blowing a whole bunch of leaves in Ash's face and blowing Pikachu to the ground. Pikachu only gets blown further back when a blast comes from seemingly nowhere and hits him. Cherry smiles as she revealed that this was the power of Future Sight, explaining that it was a time-delayed psychic attack. So essentially, the attack arrived after it was ordered, so it was able to catch an opponent off guard, as he never knew when it would show up. Thankfully, Pikachu was able to get back up from this Future Sight attack and used a Thunderbolt to counter Girafarig's Psybeam. However, when the attacks collided, this resulted in a huge explosion that caused a whole bunch of dust to be brought up. Pikachu uses the dust to his advantage, as he's able to avoid Girafarig's incoming attack and jump up into the air and then finish the match with a Thunderbolt, knocking Girafarig out. Ash, Misty, and Brock noticed that Cherry was looking sad after the loss, and they congratulated her on still putting up a great fight during the battle. However, Cherry revealed that she wasn't really upset that she lost, she was just upset that the battle didn't result in her being able to communicate telepathically with Girafarig, ashamed that their bond wasn't strong enough yet. Ash reassured her, though, that bonding took time, and that Cherry was still a good trainer regardless, as it's not like her Girafarig hated her by any means. This cheers Cherry up, and she decides to invite Ash and the gang to Lentown so that they can see all the other psychic Pokemon there. And when they arrive, there was definitely a whole bunch of psychic Pokemon. There was Execute, Executor, Abracadabra, Alakazam, Mr. Mime, basically every psychic Pokemon you could think of, at least from the first 2 generations. Like, Ash and the gang were instantly impressed with the sheer number that were literally everywhere in the city. It was like all those Slowpoke around the Slowpoke well. Like, there was that many psychic types. Suddenly, an Abra teleports into Ash's arms, leading a woman named Miss Bellows to run up to him and apologize, explaining that her Abra had been teleporting everywhere, uncontrollably. As if on cue, the Abra then teleports somewhere else, leading Miss Bellows to run off and chase after it, trying to assure everyone that the Abra simply wanted to play, and it didn't mean any harm. Just then, a man named Toku came running into the town and warned of a gigantic ghost Pokemon. He then collapsed to his knees in exhaustion from running, and explained that the ghost Pokemon seemed to be immune to psychic attacks, even though the psychics were supposed to be the ghost's one major weakness. He explains how he knew this, adding that him and his Mr. Mime were out fishing by the lake when the huge ghost Pokemon, being a Gengar seemingly, showed up, and Toku obviously had his partner Mr. Mime do a Psybeam attack, thinking it could defeat the Gengar, but unfortunately, the Psywave attack was repelled by the Gengar, and it was sent back at them. With Mr. Mime now injured by its own attack, the giant Gengar took the opportunity to roll out its tongue and use it to grab Mr. Mime and capture it inside its mouth before making its exit. As Toku continued to panic over his lost Mr. Mime, Ash and Brock decided that they were going to go investigate and find out what was up with this gigantic Gengar, as they planned to go into the forest to go look for it. Meanwhile, Team Rocket was having a toast with some orange juice, don't worry guys, not alcohol, to celebrate that they had just successfully captured a psychic Pokemon, Mr. Mime, revealing that they were the ones behind the gigantic Gengar, and it actually wasn't a Gengar, but instead a Gengar mech. Meowth then angrily slams the table, spilling Jesse and James' orange juice everywhere, stating that they shouldn't be wasting their time toasting, and should instead go back into Lentown and steal even more ghost Pokemon, as opposed to just stealing a Mr. Mime from the outskirts. Jesse and James oblige as they begin to pedal their Gengar mech in the direction of town. Before they can arrive in town, though, they're spotted once again on the outskirts, this time by Miss Bellows, as she had been following her teleporting Abra to a nearby tree. Upon seeing the mech, Miss Bellows panicked and commanded her Abra to use Psychic, which it did. However, just like with Mr. Mime's attack, the Psychic simply bounced off of the Gengar mech's eyes and hit Abra instead. With Abra down, this led Team Rocket to then scoop it up with the Gengar mech's tongue, just as they did the Mr. Mime, as they brag about how with their mech, they were actually unstoppable this time. Seriously though, 2 successful captures for Team Rocket? Damn, that might be a new record. Team Rocket then continue to make their way into Lentown, and they're eventually detected by Cherry's Girafarig using its psychic powers, and she tries to warn Cherry and Ash and the gang, but Girafarig was too late, as the Gengar mech was then spotted coming into town, as Toku realized that this was the same Gengar that attacked him. Just then, Miss Bellows rushed into town, explaining that the same thing that happened to Toku's Mr. Mime had happened to her Abra. This caused all the townsfolk in the entire town to run inside their homes to protect their psychic Pokemon, aside from Cherry, who wanted to prove how strong her Girafarig was by having it defeat the Gengar mech. Team Rocket then spotted Cherry and Girafarig as she ran up to the mech, but they were more concerned when they saw Ash and the gang, now deciding to capture Ash's Pikachu as well. They should have been concerned about Cherry though, as she ordered her Girafarig to use Psybeam, and it hit the Gengar mech. Just kidding, it only hit its eyes, and therefore the attack was reflected back at Girafarig, knocking it down. This caused Team Rocket to laugh, and finally reveal themselves, doing their motto, and finally explaining how the Gengar mech was actually able to deflect the attacks. Essentially, its eyes were mirrors, and the mirrors were able to reflect the psychic attacks back. Brock was actually fascinated by this whole process, and actually complimented Team Rocket on actually being smart for once, which made Misty grab him by the ear and drag him off much like she would do if he was simping, angrily reminding him that he wasn't supposed to be on Team Rocket's side. But I mean, Brock was right, Team Rocket actually did a unique plan for once, instead of just like digging a pitfall trap. You have to hand it to him. Anyways, as Cherry kneeled down to comfort her knocked-down Girafarig, immensely fed up with Team Rocket for what they did, she begins to glow blue, along with her Girafarig, which signified that their bond must have been growing stronger, as it was a hint of telepathy. The blue glow gave Girafarig enough power to stand back up, and Cherry ordered it to use a confusion attack. Unfortunately, this attack was simply reflected back at Girafarig as well, causing Girafarig to get paralyzed. Not actually paralyzed like the status condition, just like so confused that it could barely even move. Thankfully, Girafarig is able to recover from this as well, allowing Cherry to order it to use Psybeam this time. Of course, the effort was futile, and the attack was just reflected back yet again. This time though, Cherry and Ash both jumped in front of the Girafarig to take the brunt of the hit for it. Cherry obviously did this because she felt bad for her Pokemon and didn't want to see it in pain, but it's even more impressive that Ash did this. I mean, the Girafarig wasn't even his. That just proves how fucking kind he was. Yeah. Anyways, both Ash and Cherry were obviously injured from the blast, but Ash still demanded that Cherry get back and let him handle the situation, not wanting to see Cherry get hurt. And Cherry seemed to oblige as she backed away, but then she went up to her Girafarig and ordered it to use Future Sight, as its eyes began glowing blue, although obviously nothing happened right away. Team Rocket didn't know about what Future Sight entailed though, so when they just heard Cherry command a Future Sight and nothing happened, they assumed that Girafarig was just going to tell them their fortune or something, much to Ash and the gang's annoyance. Like, did you really think that the Girafarig was going to do something like that? Come on, man. Why would Cherry order an attack like that? Anyways, while waiting for the Future Sight to charge up, Ash ordered Pikachu to run in to attack the Gengar mech, when suddenly Cherry had a psychic vision, realizing that she had finally been able to communicate telepathically with Girafarig because of them both glowing blue a few minutes ago. Having come to the conclusion that this vision that she was seeing was sent to her from Girafarig. This vision was of the Gengar mech licking up Pikachu and capturing him. She proceeded to warn Ash of the vision that she just saw, which allowed Pikachu to be prepared for the incoming tongue, allowing it to dodge before it grabbed it. Cherry then got an idea, and commanded Girafarig to use Confusion on Pikachu. This allowed Pikachu to get lifted up into the air, and avoid the Gengar mech's tongue some more, as Team Rocket was relentless and refused to give up. Eventually, Pikachu was able to fly so far away that the Gengar mech's tongue wasn't able to stretch far enough to catch it. This meant that Pikachu could freely take the time to use a Thunderbolt on the Gengar mech, which caused it to get severely damaged, and also freed Mr. Mime and Abra in the process, returning them to their trainers as they fell to the ground. With their mech almost destroyed at this point, Team Rocket decide that they should send out their Pokémon to try and battle Ash's Pikachu, but before they can do this, the wind begins to blow, signifying that the future sight had finally arrived, and arrive it did as it struck Team Rocket, causing the remainder of their mech to explode and sending them blasting off. The episode then ends with Ash and the gang congratulating Cherry and Girafarig on achieving a bond so good that they were able to communicate telepathically now, as Ash and the gang say their goodbyes and head off. With Cherry shouting in the distance, declaring that her and her Girafarig would someday achieve a bond that was as good as Ash and Pikachu's, knowing that they were already well on their way to that.